Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast,
the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education.
The goal is to provide meaningful conversations to what is currently happening in our classrooms.
Stories, pains,
moments of success.
We want to hear it all.
Friends, and hear it all we shall, because we got a full room here. This is a big old party. And I don't even know if the internet is ready for this conversation, because Sophie and I both have had conversations with the two guests that we have here, both Will and Josh from High Tech Podcast. And so we'll kind of talk about that, like origin stories of how we met. They did not meet me awkwardly just through like a DM on Twitter. But we got connected. I was on their show talking about my passions and you know, everything that I've done for better or for worse. And I, you know, working with Sophie, I'm like, you have to be on this podcast because they kind of like the same stuff we like Star Wars and Harry Potter, Lord of the Rings, Ted Lasso, which that's a whole different conversation. And I know a passion of Will's. If you're joining us here, whether it's live up on the Insta or where else do we go? YouTube, the Facebooks, or if you're catching it after on the usual suspects, right? Like the Spotify, the Apple, where else? Amazon, the Googles, wherever it is. Feel free to continue to drop that love. And remember, just as a reminder, you can share that love, give a review. But we're up in underhatpod.com. Feel free to find all the links. Last week we did the new brand. We did kind of revealed all of that stuff. All of that should be up to date. And so I'm just super excited to fix this background. Okay, cool. I'm super excited to fix this background. And as Sophie makes this very clear, probably on a regular basis, I'm the one that's always prepared. And I normally prepare while it's happening. Yeah. And maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's a bad thing. I don't know. But yeah, welcome. Sophie, before we get going, how are you today?
I'm fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. I am. I'm super excited to be here. Unlike Steve, I did meet Will and Josh through an awkward DM on Twitter. X. It was Twitter then. X. And yeah, so I did. And then I was on their podcast, and then Steve was on their podcast again for a different topic. So yeah, it's always a fun experience to meet people. And yes, we do enjoy a lot of the same things, a lot of the total geeky things that are in our lives, and I love sharing that passion. So to get this kicked off here, Josh, tell me about your education journey.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've had no education at all. No, I'm just joking. I just skipped that part. No, yeah. So my background in education a little bit, as we've told on our podcast a bunch of different times, is I was kind of the late bloomer in education, being that high school Josh was quite horrible. And then college Josh decided he actually cared about life and got into it. And I found my passion for education at that point, right? It really impacted my life. Will and I have been college friends for a long time, so we were both on that journey together. And I'm happy to say I think I only beat Will in one class, let's be honest. But it was barely scratched through it. But anyway, I went into a completely different journey after college. Then I was in ministry for a little bit and decided that was not what I wanted to do. And ironically, Will was leaving his job as my favorite job title in the world, instructional technologist / learning systems administrator. Everybody loves a slash on their business card. And so I blame Will for that. You need
2 lines, you know?
Yeah, it was great. It was really easy to get people to understand what I did. So he was leaving that position and had recommended that I check it out. I was looking to get into higher ed. I'd been doing some TA work, helping grade papers, things like that, and wanted to get more into teaching. And so I entered into that position, which started a 5.5-year journey that I did not expect would happen. I ended up loving what we were doing. I worked in office that helped design fully online and hybrid courses with faculty members, and ended up loving that kind of the learning and development, field kind of came to light for me, and just really enjoyed designing courses. And I did get to do some teaching that I've taught a handful of college courses, but really found that I loved the art of organizing a team and the project management that goes behind kind of that space, and like kind of organizing how we design solid online learning experiences that actually encourage learning. And so that was kind of my passion. So 5.5 years later, was doing that. I ended up managing an instructional technology team then for a couple of years in that, and helping our team produce over 100 academic courses in a year, and kind of working in that space. So, and I've done stuff like faculty development, things like that, helping them learn the LMS and how to use it well. And then recently transitioned out of higher education into more adult education of corporate learning and development. So I'm now actually a senior instructional designer, and designing training content from everything from leadership development to people making food. It's the dynamic that I'm in right now.
How to make a sandwich, how to make a team, how to make a sandwich, you know?
But it's the same principles, right? So same learning design principles and same dynamics. You're trying to get somebody across a gap that they're in. And so that has been really cool. So working with that team, that was just a recent transition this summer, deciding to try something a little bit different. And so that's a little bit of a journey.
I feel like that's a name for something, like Across the Gap. Like maybe
Across
a
the Gap?
school, like maybe
Ooh.
that should be the name of a school, like,
Yeah.
or some sort of maybe professional learning company. I'm gonna put a pin in this idea.
I like it.
Wait a second.
like
Do we need to start talking percentages?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I already own that, Steve. So if you're gonna use it, you know.
Oh.
Nailed it.
But yeah, that's my journey, at least up to this point. We'll see what happens tomorrow.
A lot could happen in 24 hours.
It can.
Yes, fantastic. Thank you so much. And Will, what about your journey in education?
Yeah, Josh and I met in college, and at that time I was trying to be an English language teacher. I wanted to travel the world and teach English. Sophie. Amazing. I mean, I did everything from like second language acquisition. I took a year or a semester where we had to like literally learn other languages to try and learn how to teach language, and did all that. And then I was trying to get right out of college, trying to get a job, and I landed as an office assistant in the Office of Online Education, and that was honestly the best thing that's ever happened to me. From that moment, I shortly became the instructional technologist / LMS or learning systems administrator. I moved out of office assistant.
It's hard.
Yep. I can't even remember it, right? But at that point, I just started helping faculty. I got in the weeds. I figured out what it was like to do online education, build online courses, run LMSs, like all of that kind of stuff. And that set my career. I've now at 3 different big career changes been like an LMS administrator always. I've had kind of that technical background, and then the kind of faculty support around that. But then, just like Josh, taught a few courses, designed courses. I was kind of the lead on the Masters of Electrical Engineering for a while at Penn State Harrisburg. Like, it was a wild bunch of different things. Now, like Josh, I'm also in corporate, and while it sounds like Josh has landed more in like the learning and development, lucky you, I have become mostly a glorified compliance grunt. I hate to put it that way, but like, I run compliance, and it's like the best worst job. No one wants what I have to do, right? No one wants to take the 4-hour security course or the 2-hour anti-harassment course, but I do find it very important. These are subjects we need to address, and I get to be a part of trying to at least make them a little better, work a little better, feel a little better, go a little better for my employees. So that's my shtick. It's this is my 10th year in my career and stuff like that. So it's been a fun journey that way.
I do think that's important though, because like I've done just working for various different, schools, and now at the university level, CAMI, like you have to do those trainings, right?
Yep.
But you can feel the difference when you're like, when the content or like the instructional design is of quality or when it's not. And it's not just about the engagement, it's also about, like, if it's high quality, you actually make more connections as to, like, okay, cool, like the
Yeah.
buying of, like, oh, why this is important, and
Yeah.
maybe we have, like, our own moral compass on some of these topics where we'll naturally do that, but they're there for a reason,
Yeah.
you know? So no, I think that's terrific. I think it's, super
Your
important.
your point lands though for the fact of like anti-harassment discrimination. We are legally required to do it in the United States. We want to do it. It's a important thing to address. And people complain about the amount of time it takes. If you live in California, for instance, you have to do 2 hours. Here's one of those things where we have those moments of like a gap to address, right? Instead of making a module, we use a vendor for that content because it's a lot of legalese. We got to make sure we address those policies and stuff. Instead of making 2 hours of content, they just give the same content, but it has a 2-hour timer. So if you finish the content in 40 minutes, you just literally have to keep the browser up till it ticks to 2 hours. And that's one of those things, like, I can't fix it. It's something we bought from the vendor, but that's an experience issue that I think is important. Like, okay, we legally are required to give 2 hours of training. Let's give 2 hours of training. I mean, not that anybody wants to do that, but be more valuable than sitting there waiting for an hour and 20 minutes for your timer to finish.
Can I just say though, I wish certain things were transferable, and here's what I mean. And this is
He has what I call the a million side jobs. It's like he's like, I'm gonna go do this side hustle. I'm gonna go do this side hustle. So I'm assuming he's gonna say, I already watched this at this job, and now I have to watch it.
Like you could clip out of internet security. Yeah, is that what you're throwing?
Well, so no, but so here's the thing. I have to do the same training for the district that I teach in, for the company that I work at, for the university that I teach at. I'm like, girl, this is the same content. Now it's from different vendors, right? Kind of what Will's talking about, but it's literally the same, especially when they get into the legality of it. I'm like, okay, cool. I know that
somebody get me a badge. Could I have a badge? Please?
Yeah.
Says,
Here, have a cookie. You did the training. There you go.
Yeah. But ultimately, that's my fault for
diversifying,
gallivanting, as Sophie would say.
Gallivanting.
I'd take that, Steve. I would take that and run with it. Okay, if you can have like tons of cool hats and you can gallivant, that's how you're described. I think you're winning.
There are much worse ways to be described in life, I feel like. Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure that's happened. But I will. I'll do an action photo. Well, yeah.
Not by me this month.
It's only been 7 days. There's time.
There's a lot of time. Okay, this is gonna be wild. This is gonna be fun. So like you both are in some ways similar work, right? Like really like the adult ed space, right? In like the large umbrella of it, but tackling it in various different ways. I think that's empowering. And like Sophie and I being from the classroom or the instructional coach within public education, now being on the CAMI side, we do feel that, right? Like supporting the adults, the teachers, the administrators, the instructional coaches. I think it's a cool space to be in. For me, like adult ed, and this has just been my experience because someone recently contradicted me, just someone that I met, but I always felt that adult ed, like they really appreciate you being there. Which that's just been my experience. Like I met someone recently, like that was not my experience in adult ed. I'm like, okay, cool.
But I think on the adults that are in your adult ed program, because sometimes the adults and the adults are 16-year-olds that have dropped out of high school. So
yeah. I think it also depends on the topic that you're doing, right? Like, so like Will's talking about, like the compliance stuff, while important, most people are not like super jazzed by internet security. Now I will say I had somebody who worked on my last team that was super jazzed by internet security, so he probably would have loved your training, Will. Like that's the dynamic. Or even in my dynamic, it's like the leadership training stuff that we end up doing, I think people are more kind of pumped about. The ones who are getting like have to sit down on a computer before starting their actual job in a physical location, it's a mixed bag whether or not they're excited about it. But I think no matter what it is, it's still super important. Like I think you underplay sometimes the importance of the compliance training and things, and even the high stakes that we find in some of those environments. Because often Will and I are designing content that's not going to have a real instructor in that moment at all, like even like an online course. And so the stakes, I think, are really high for what kind of instructional design happens. Like if it doesn't happen well, that's how you get those trainings that if I had to click next one more time on basically a PowerPoint slide, my head was going to explode. Like really intentional design is really important at that level, because you have no net of an instructor to try to jump in and adjust in the moment when things aren't going well.
Yeah.
And sometimes having the instructor there is worse than just clicking next on the
It is a flip of a coin, isn't it?
Yeah,
You really don't know. I remember there was a time, if we all know Schoology, I think they're still going, but there was a time where it was a much smaller company. It was still kind of a startup, and I did a lot of contracting for them. I would go into districts who would literally request me annually, and I would be there every summer seeing the same folks, a couple of new faces, but then I'd go into like a new district and a different district, and there'd be like 30% of the people who are just up in the front paying attention, and then there'd be like this row in the back of folks just like, I'm here because I have to be. Some districts worked. Some districts, the people would just disengage. I had somebody come up to me once after a session and be like, you're great. I loved you. You're engaging. Your presence awesome. I'm not going to do a thing you said. And I was like, wow. And I was like, why? You started the conversation. Like, why? Like, I retire in 2 years. I'm not going to learn any of this stuff. I was like,
nice pause.
Sorry. I don't remember where we are on these kinds of things, but you know what I mean? It was like, that's the real people that we meet, right? Those are the people behind the desk. Yeah. And we're just the people under the hat.
Boom. So okay, so yeah, let's if we can pivot, really quick, like the podcast, high tech is like something that, when I listen, I'm like, it's of great quality. It's welcoming, like it's people that are listening to this, like will feel that, right? We're like, oh, these are two passionate humans, but also like are okay to just be themselves, which is not every podcast, right? Not just in education, but in general.
Right.
So like maybe talk a little bit about like how did the show form? Like maybe the general premise, like the big goal of it. Anything you'd love to share about the work that you all are doing as podcasters.
Yeah.
Josh, I think you get the form, but I'm going to jump real quick to like where we are at the moment, because like you just pointed out, Steve, I don't want to lose that. What we are doing even right now is we've rebranded the podcast in the last 10 episodes. I don't know when this is airing live. I don't know when you put yours out, but whatever. But like very recently we've rebranded and we're expanding our scope because Josh and I are now in adult ed, and we started it from a higher ed perspective. There's going to be some adjustments, some changes, whatever. But like, that's a point that we're sticking to. We're still just trying to be us and talk about the things that we're good at doing. And that's why we're doing a little bit of rebrand. That's why we look at it a little bit differently. That's why our guests are changing a little bit. That's why our topics are broadening up. We're okay to talk education. We want to. That's not a problem. But we're trying to talk about more because, like you said, just trying to be true to us. So I just wanted to hit that because you had just brought it up, Steve. I appreciate that. Josh, take us away.
Yeah. So back to the beginning. It was a rainy night and an October.
Couldn't see out through the rain.
No, so like this all actually spawns pre-COVID, right? It was when I took the job from Will. I took it from him. He was already leaving. It was basically like I applied for it, and I still joke to this day. I don't know why they gave it to me. While I was a TA, I had no like formal experience in educational technology. Like I was not, other than knowing what the LMS they were using was at the time. So like in comparison to Will at that moment, I had like no understanding of what was going on. But they were like, this guy has a nice beard, take the job. I don't know. I don't know what happened. So
I'm pretty sure that's how I got hired at Cami.
Right? That's usually how it works.
No, your beard was not that good when you got hired at Cami.
Ooh, ouch.
Actually, she's true. So, okay, not to pivot from Josh's talking point here. I recently shared with some of my colleagues what my beard used to look like because it's much shorter. There was one where it was like middle of pandemic where she was like, Sophie was like, you look way older then than you do now. I'm like a fine wine. But yes, to her point.
Merlot or Malbec? That's what I want to know.
Oh, it's a good Merlot. Yeah.
Obviously. Yeah. If it makes you feel better, Steve, I've only shaved. So I've had, not to pivot off my topic, I'll come back in a second. But I've had facial hair since basically 12. And I only shaved it off once when I accidentally shaved a hole in my beard because I was sharing a razor at the time. For those who've listened to our podcast,
you know, right, Sophie?
Yeah, we'll go listen. They know I was in a band at the time, so I was like living at home and I was shaving before a show. And I shaved a hole, so I shaved my whole beard off. And even my wife describes it this way. I looked like a naked mole rat. Like that can't ever happen again. That's why this stays. So anyway, they hired me because of my beard, clearly, as we've clearly decided right now. Yeah, so like I got to the job and I remember I was like, okay, I want to beef up on specifically like at tech. Like I knew how to use tech. I've always been good at using tech. But like I didn't know a lot of the tools that were out there. And every podcast I would go listen to, because that was my go-to. I at the time had like a 45-minute drive to work. So I was trying to listen to podcasts. They were all really couple things. One, a lot of them weren't like really talking nitty-gritty about actually using the tech. And a lot of them were K-12 at the time, which was fine. But I was in a higher ed experience. So I was in that environment is different. Like, especially as Will and I have talked to more K-12 people and higher ed people on the high tech podcast over the last 3 years. It is a different world, especially at the ed tech level. It's a little bit of a different vibe of how things are handled. And so I remember distinctly, we were like up in Will's attic at the time. He was painting some wall and we were talking about this issue and we were like, well, what if we started a podcast, you know? And we were like, yeah, that'd be a great idea. And then we didn't. For two years, basically, until COVID, when every person started a podcast. We decided to start a podcast.
What else you got to do, you know?
We were just like, let's just do this thing. We were being too big picture. We kept like trying to plan out everything, and we'd hit a wall because it just seemed like too much. So finally, we were just like, let's just open Zoom, let's record, we'll see what happens from there. And that started it. And so our premise has always kind of been back then was always we had a conversation in an app and we were trying to focus in on the higher ed space, especially initially. We were releasing apps every time we talk about them. We'd give some episode pages, stuff like that. And then I think as the podcast, like Will has been alluding to, has kind of been evolving over the last 3 years. We found more friends like you guys who were more from the K-12 environment that we were really loving talking to. We were talking to a lot of apps from the K-12 environment. And so we were really enjoying that. And then I think a distinct moment where the next evolution, so we broadened, I think, our education topics, and we were still always kind of coming from this bent because Will and I are originally kind of from learning and development and instructional design. There was always kind of this how you design learning, and then technology, I think, is always kind of a part of what we wanted to talk about. And but then a distinct thing happened last year for us. We decided to start a company because we weren't busy enough called Harness Tech. And originally it was just so we could try to make money off the podcast. But at that moment, am I still here? I'm here.
You are still here. Froze a little bit, but we got everything up to,
at that moment.
Started to try and make
you all
money.
Froze like terrifying people. And I was like, crap, I lost my
You got a screenshot.
Anyway, we started the company and it was originally just to make money off the podcast itself. And Will, 5 seconds in, decides to find a client because we had talked about we wanted to do learning and development for other people. And Will, like literally 3 days after LLCing the company, the networking ninja himself finds a client somewhere, like a really big client. It was a very big project. And we ended up getting it. And that spawned that entire year of basically developing e-learnings for a separate company through Harness Tech, and pulled some money into the company and helped us fund a handful of other things. We started doing some other learning and development for other people. We were able to hire some people for the podcast. So we now have a social media manager on the podcast.
It's the best.
It's the best. I highly recommend it. If you're
that sounds amazing. This you're
What's his
speaking.
name?
I'm almost getting teary eyed just thinking about the notion, which we'll talk about in a bit. The notion of having of having some help like that. No, that's amazing.
Yeah.
See,
Anyway,
he thought that's what I was gonna do. He thought that I would be helping out in that way. But yeah.
Well, that's what I thought Will would do too, Sophie. We very clearly have a dynamic, like on these hosts. But it also spawned out. We just got really busy. Like Will and I were doing projects on top of the podcast, and it was all the time. So we needed to kind of spawn out some stuff. We actually brought in some other contractors into our company to do some stuff. I've always loved project management and productivity, and I think that started to spawn for us this dynamic because we organized the whole company. We were doing some really cool stuff, and we were like, we want to talk about this stuff too. We don't want to just talk about ed tech, which we love. We want to talk though about like what we've been doing here, how we strategize, what we do, what we've done in other areas, that kind of space, learning and development. And so that kind of spawned a conversation that had been building, which was the rebrand of the High Tech Podcast. And that happened last year. We've actually been working on it since January, planning out what that look was going to be. And Chris, our social media manager, joined the team a couple months later and helped work with Dad Designer, who we've talked with about on our podcast just recently. And they did a fantastic job. They rebranded, and that's kind of where we're at. We're really excited. We've got some cool episodes coming about social media and its effect on humanity, and talking about like some broader topics. And we're really excited. We got some cool stuff planned for this new year on the podcast.
There may or may not be a Halloween theme coming together and a Christmas theme coming together. We might be reaching out with a little ask of friends of the podcast about a holiday thing.
So Sophie and I were more Halloween
for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Not that I'm anti-Christmas. I'm not. I'm just.
No, we're gonna do a season's greetings. It's gonna be broad. It's just gonna be wintry.
We can bring some people in on the Halloween episode.
It's true.
We got some fun concepts. I don't want to say anything yet because I literally just threw ideas last night at like midnight.
I'm just gonna say with a show of hands, who has some cosplay?
Oh, I have two hands.
Perfect. I have a Halloween tree we just put up yesterday.
Oh my gosh! Yes,
Sophie. Oh,
love it.
Got to turn on, Josh. That's.
I was trying to find the button.
Needs new batteries.
What is it doing? There we go.
Oh, there it is. Yes,
he's ready.
For those not watching, Josh just pulled out a lightsaber.
He had to.
And I'm like looking around on my geek shelves, and I'm like, what can I pull out real quick? Okay.
Frankly, the tiara is setting the tone. So just lead.
I thought about wearing one on a regular basis. So you've just taken the.
I pretty much do.
I love it.
I work from home. I can wear whatever I want.
Yeah.
No. So Josh, like, just something I really appreciate with what you said earlier was, like, this idea of like we see this wide range of podcasts out there. And sometimes it's like they lock themselves into like this very specific thing. Whether it's like, oh, here's a podcast about AI, let's say, or even just ed tech, right? Because that in itself is it's super small in terms of the grand scheme of education. So, and that was kind of the thinking behind this show was like, let's talk about anything.
Mm-hmm.
Not anything within reason, but anything within education. And I feel like that was part of the rebrand, right? Like for you too, is like, how do you diversify what you're doing with the show instead of just talking about the tools themselves? Which I think is great.
And High Tech, the name was always just, it started higher education, educational technology, right? High Tech. Now we just cut out everything in the middle. Well, High Tech. We everything Josh and I do, from like the mice we buy and the software we use and the apps we use, like everything we use is optimized, is intended to be productive. This keyboard, the MX Master Mini, great, love it.
Not
3
sponsored
Bluetooth
at all.
switchers.
That
Not
kind of sounded like a sponsored time, but we should. Yeah, if they want to, they can get us at hightechpod.us.
Or under the hat.com. Under the hat.
Yeah, you can sponsor both of us. Just do whatever you would
All
like.
of us. Everyone gets
Logitech, I
sponsored.
know you're looking for more podcasts to sponsor. If you want to,
But everything we do is this, so it's easy. Like you said, it's easy to just be us and talk about, like, Josh, we're going to do an episode on Logitech now. I mean, we have to. There's so much tech we use from Logitech. We shouldn't not do an episode about it. But it's just about, hopefully, always inspiring others to take up some of our practices, use some of the software we're doing. Come and share with us. Bring something to our pod that does the same. That's what I love about yours. You're just bringing people together, and let's just see what comes up.
Yeah, because there's totally a script for all this. And
anxiety. It really does give me a lot of anxiety to come in, like, because I remember being like, Will, what are you going to ask me? I need to plan this. I have anxiety. Like, you need to tell me what's going on.
He's like, I don't know.
We're going to ask you about you. It's like
breaking fourth wall here, right? Like, I think, Sophie, you're the reason I started writing questions to guests. Like, you were the first person who came to me like, hey, what are we going to talk about? I was like, yeah, we should think that through, shouldn't we? So now I do tell guests when I send out things ahead of time, like, hey, this is like a starting point. If it's helpful for you, it's helpful for you. If not, we're conversational. We'll riff and we'll keep things moving. So it's always useful to just jump back, like, what should we talk about next? There's a question. But
Steve didn't do anything when I was on it.
No, well, so okay, so I've come across several different things with the total Steve nature of how I do things, right? So one situation, which I'm not gonna call out names here or whatever, but like one person, like, they filled out my form and they're like, okay, cool. They sent me a document of questions for me. Like, here's questions that you can ask me. And that's completely fine. Like, if that grounds them, like, oh, cool. Like, I'm totally going to lean into this. Conversely, though, I've been on the other side where I'm the guest, right? So Josh, we were talking about that earlier, right? Like the stress being lifted off. So I was the guest and they send me this 5-page document. I'm not going to share which show it was, but I literally was like, yeah, I'm not going to look at this. Like, I cool. Like, I'm just going to go in and just talk. Like, so everyone's different. And I try to be accommodating with what they need, right? Like, cause the format for me works because I don't have the time to write out a script. I don't have the time to like edit. Like, I don't freak out about editing. Like, which do you two edit? Is that something that you all do? Because that's my question.
Like a tiny bit. Yeah.
Okay.
Only
so here's the history of editing with the High Tech Podcast. A few folks, like maybe 2 or 3, have cursed on the podcast, and we like to not check the explicit box. So I go out and I just literally mute if they let something drop.
I'm really sorry that I did that, by the way.
It was like every other sentence was Steve. He was like dropping
practically right. Marshall Mathers over here just dropping bombs. But that, and then one time we said something about a sponsor, about somebody's sponsor, and we didn't know.
It's okay, you can point to me. It was fine. It was basically me. I went on. We were quite both a long making time fun about of Microsoft. It's fine.
And then the only other thing is, like, sometimes you'll have connection issues. Like one of the recent episodes, some guy was having some lag, so I just go and cut the dead space. I've had people like completely drop and come back, cut that, make it splice. But like content wise, no, it is roll. Like if we hit start, I want it on there.
Nice. Pretty much. So you're probably wondering why I invited all of you today. So like we should talk about
an intervention.
We
intervention right now?
For myself.
Okay.
So so and here's the intervention that I need. And so Sophie will speak to this. Like, I feel in my head that I'm productive, and then Sophie will be like, Steve, why are you doing it this way?
Why did you do it that way?
And then I'm like, oh, duh. So
I'm like 5 steps ahead of him. Like, that's just how my brain works. And he's like, I want to do this idea. And I'm like, okay, you're going to do like this, or you could do it this way. Like, it doesn't really matter which way you do it. And he was like, this has got to be easier. yesterday at work, actually, he's like, "This has got to be easier than than the way that I'm doing it." And I went in and I'm like, "Yeah, no." But half the time I do come up with a better solution, because there's just better ways to do things once you start thinking about it. And there's a different way that my brain just sort of sees big picture and can narrow down on like those steps that need to happen. I love productivity tools. I love having like a list.
This side of the podcast over here, as I point to Josh and Sophie.
So I actually am going to be on a podcast soon, and they did send me a script, and I'm like, sweet.
So it wasn't us. I didn't send you a script.
No, no, it was. It was their side of the script. So I already know everything that he's going to say, and I'm going to fill in what I need to say, because it's very much not about me. It's very much about Cammie. So it's really nice to know exactly what they're going to say, know exactly what's going to be expected. And marketing was also very appreciative.
Always. And meanwhile, here's my list. It's literally empty. Like there is no list. I think where like what I really lean in, and that's kind of the nice thing about working for a company like Cammie, is like we get to really flex in where we're really strong, and then give us bandwidth to grow where we need to grow, right? And so for me, just get me in front of teachers. Just get me in front of teachers to talk about the learning, the tool, the transformation that can occur. And Sophie's really great, like making sure that Steve does get in front of teachers, like at a conference or like, and so you kind of need both. And that's what's really cool about our dynamic. But so this anti-unproductive tech, which was totally Sophie's idea for a topic, just kidding. It was mine, and I know it's terrible. But so like what are some nuggets? What are some gems? Like I know you both are really into Notion. And so
Notion.
So Sophie and I both use Notion. I know that y'all are going to talk about it. I have questions because I'll be honest, Sophie probably works in Notion more. I'm the consumer of Notion. I'm really great about consuming. I'm like, oh, this is really pretty. I know Sophie did this. And so yeah, so I'm just curious, like where, like any type of insight that you may have.
I'm guessing. I'm 99% sure you did not organize our 4 squares intentionally, Steve, but you did put us on one side together and them on one side together, and it is
you basically just described our relationship. It's hilarious.
Our co-hosts are equivalent. We have the same podcast marriages. It's great. This is wonderful. Like before I encourage.
Find something else other than Notion. You go ahead and talk about something else other than Notion. I'll talk about Notion. It's fine.
I'm actually going to roll one step back to a philosophical, I don't know, statement, or it's for me, it's like core. It's fundamental to productivity, and especially when you're talking, like you just said, in the context of work, like get Steve in front of the faculty, to the teachers, the whatever. Sophie, not like stay away, but like stay back there and pull Steve's strings, put Steve where he needs to be, and any other team members, whatever. A friend of mine is really interested in and follows a lot of information around the working genius archetypes, and that's one of the personality tests or whatever. But they build their things out in a way that actually has landed with me the best that I've ever looked at those kinds of, like, I'm an INFJ, but what does that really tell me about my personality type, Myers-Briggs? I don't know. When it comes to the working genius, it kind of comes to that kind of skills area of where you're good at doing things. Like I believe that, and I believe as myself as an evidence, there are people who are not necessarily great at the project management side or the documentation side who are still very good at working and being productive, right? Oh, yeah, that's Steve and my side of the Brady Bunch here. And we need Sophie's and Josh's, frankly, to help us. Like if you let me go as a sole contributor, I'm going to do what's required of me, and I'm going to get productive. And sometimes, you held up the blank notepad, Steve, but sometimes that's a little, in August, going into my vacation, I literally used 3x5 cards where I just had to write stuff down every day. There you go, Sophie. I need to get purple. That's what I need. That is what I'm missing.
That actually
Purple,
genuinely is something you need.
purple cards. But like when I think about the work I've done in my career and the things that, like, I can point to very specific projects that were successful as a part of my work, as a part of my contribution. Could I tell you today, I put in X hours and we achieved X outcomes and we did that? No, I never tracked it. I'm not good at that. But I think the number one thing for me is, like, once you can identify first your type of self, some people are not as productive as they could be and they need a system. I think that I thrive more in systems. I'm not good at creating them. I'm not good at setting them up. So, like, once you figure out that first step, honestly, go check out Working Genius. Go check out just whatever, there's Insights Discovery, there's DISC, there's so many sites of leadership and self-discovery tools out there. Learn a little bit about yourself and where you are. If you think you could start to create your own systems and manage yourself, maybe it is a piece of paper that is functional. Set out your daily goals. I have a colleague, a local colleague, who has a board with wins and losses, and he puts all of his things up on the thing, and every day he goes over his 4 to 5 priorities and he stamps it win or loss and he puts it on that bracket, and it's a motivator. It helps him stay on top of his priorities. But you can, all of those things inside, also build a super database like Josh, and you can track everything. And I love it. Like, if you wanted to ask us anything we've done in the High Tech Podcast or for Harness Tech, Josh can answer the question. What we did, when we did it, who was involved, how much time or effort it took, if we ever made any money on it, right? Like we have that data because Josh built the system, and Josh is very good at that. That's why I stand by him as my partner in crime, my colleague, my buddy, my best friend. But when he took my job, like, I put him forward, I was like, I know this guy's going to take care of this stuff. And the recent thing I told some other people was like, Josh is going to take care of you. If you get him behind your work, you're going to go that much further. You need both. You need a Steve who's down there in the faculty. And I know Josh is good in front of faculty. I've seen Sophie I know we're all good at that too. But like, Steve, you and I are over here and we are not good with the other stuff. So let's leave it to Josh and Sophie to make us better. That's my pitch.
Steve does do a pretty good job. Once I tell him what the steps are, he will follow them.
I am great at following steps.
That's Will.
I love following steps.
No, I think, like, getting to the tech side, right? Like, it's funny, we've been making this joke. We're trying to restrict ourselves because we like never talked about Notion on the podcast much until, like, we rebranded the podcast. I feel like for a solid, and it was our own doing. We picked that series to lead off with, but we did nothing but talk about Notion for like 4 weeks. So we've been trying to restrict ourselves. But I will say, like, when it comes to the tech side, I think the first tech that we're obviously using quite a lot for us that works is Notion. I know for others who don't, they find other things. We were just recently talking to Dad Ziner, the guy who designed our new brand, and he uses Trello for everything. It's a project management software, and he loves it. And he has a system down. Will and I worked with him, and it was really, really well done with the way he did it. For us, we use Notion, and I think the reason I pitch Notion a lot to people is that I've used a lot of different software for productivity over the years. And I've used everything from like Microsoft Planner to, at one point I had a very bad system set up in Evernote during my early days. Past Josh was an idiot. And I tried a lot of different things. And the thing that I really like about Notion is, at the end of the day, it can be whatever you need it to be. Like, and that's a double-edged sword. That's a lot of the reason sometimes people back away from Notion, because it's overwhelming. There's like a ton of stuff you can do. Yeah,
there's a lot of things that you can do with it if you know how to do it, and there's a lot of things that it can turn into because you know how to manipulate it. It is sort of like an all-in-one tool and can do what you want if you know how to make it do what you want.
I take us to this quick metaphor. I think we all know Legos and Playmobil. Like, I don't know if Playmobil is still popular, but Legos has kept its name brand around. I see Notion versus the typical project management names, Asana, Trello, Jira, etc., as like a Legos Playmobil thing, right? Like Playmobil, you got your little people, you could take their heads off, take their hats off, but they were set, and they had cars and they were set. Legos, you practically had to build everything, and you could make it into anything you wanted. So in Playmobil, you were kind of given, here's the little water set, the emergency Coast Guard set. You played emergency Coast Guard. But over here with Legos, you could build an ocean scene, and you could build a submarine, and you could build, like you could build it, but you had to. And that's kind of the downside of Notion. It is hands-on. If you don't know what you want your end product to be, or if you don't have an imagination for that kind of work, like that's not my skill set. I'm not good at envisioning what it's going to be. I know what we use today. Josh has worked me through our programs, our setups today, and I could probably rebuild it. But if I had never seen it, I never would have built it. I have the technical ability. I know Notion. I can set up databases. I can do the kind of filtering and formatting. Like I'm confident I could rebuild it. But I'm a Playmobil guy. Give me the Coast Guard set and let me play with it. I do not want to make my ocean scene from the ground up. Like that's my little metaphor. And I think that's where Notion's so powerful. But if you don't have a Notion expert, or if you don't have a template or a starting point, we've met people who just hate it. They don't like it. I get it.
Yeah.
I'm more concerned that you've been ripping heads off Playmobiles. Like, can I just jump in there? Like, I had Playmobiles. What the heck are you doing, you monster? Their heads don't just like pop off like normal. It's not a thing you're supposed to be. They're like
those heads?
Yeah, like that's.
He's just misremembered.
Yeah, he misremembered. It's fine. It's okay.
Well, I was kind of envisioning. I'm like, wait, is this like little kid Will, or is he doing this now as an adult?
I'm gonna leave that to
Will has a Playmobil room. It's
yes.
Retro only. Most of them are in boxes still. Don't touch them.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna do another comparison of what Will sort of said on LMSs. So you've got Schoology, where you can literally build so much stuff in there. If you fall in love with, because Steve has showed me, because I'm not a Schoology guru like Steve is. You could build so much stuff in there. You could do almost anything if you know how to use things that are already in Schoology. And then you have Google Classroom. It does this. And that's it. So it's like you've got your one trick pony there with a little bit of customization, but then you've got Schoology. You can customize everything in there, or Blackboard or Canvas, and you can just customize so much in that learning environment that once you get to know how to do it and you can do all these really cool things, you're like, don't give me any other LMS. Like, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
Heaven forfend you end up in Moodle, and now you're just like plug and play. What are you gonna want to do? Write your own HTML and CSS.
Steve is like, I don't know.
Well, so no, my university, they're Canvas now, but for a while they were like low key Moodle, like they were just like, oh, professors and instructors, they can use it if they want. I went in there once and I'm like, I was offended. I'm like, well, like, I don't even know what I was looking at. I'm like, okay,
I don't want to use this. I'm not giving it to the students.
Yeah, exactly. And so to Sophie's point about Schoology, and Will, it sounds like you've done some work pretty extensively with either Schoology or now PowerSchool, like depending on.
I left at the transition.
Okay.
I was a contractor, and they're like, "Hey, if anybody wants to roll over," I'm like, "I think this is a good time."
Like, yeah. So this is where like I get frustrated with all of them, like Canvas, Schoology, Classroom. If we want to consider Teams a learning management system, right? Like, which let's okay, cool. And so
I got a reaction to that. That hurt a little bit.
This is where none of them really have my love, because like I go into Classroom and I'm like, this is not a learning management system. This is a learning storage system at best. Like at best, like so what I want to do in Classroom, I want to create, I have a topic, I want subtopic, I want to create folders, I want to embed certain things, HTML, like and Schoology, you can do all that, but girl, it takes forever to build. And once you have it built, that's great. You put it up in your resources and it'll always be there. But why can't why can't there be a middle ground of like making it productive? Yay, I'm tying it all back together. Making it productive, but also letting a teacher like design something that is welcoming and appropriate and customizable for their students.
Use emojis in Google Classroom.
These emojis in Google Classroom. There's, you should. I will recommend. This is a toss out, Steve. You might want to check out. Sorry, you broke Will with the emojis in Google Classroom. You might check out
Steve's reaction.
We've had this conversation before.
You might want to check out an LMS called Pathright. So like go check out an LMS called Pathright. They're a little bit lower key, but they I think they do a good job of like bridging that gap a little bit, where they're like they've got some Google Classroom vibes to them, but they're very specifically focused for a type of thing, which is they are convinced, right? And I don't necessarily disagree with them that like there are paths in learning for learners depending on where they're going. And so like they're very much on like, how do we make an LMS that supports paths that can really like kind of create a pathway and a journey. If that sounds cool or confusing, those are both of those things, and you should go to the website and check them out. But I love what they do. I think they kind of meet that middle, though. It gets to something I will point out. I think in this productive tech conversation, right? Like Will and I've been talking about this a lot, and this came out in our series we did over the summer about productivity, which is at the end of the day, I see a lot of people trying to solve productivity problems by shoving tech at it. And the reality is like, I love tech that helps with those areas, but that's not going to solve it until you figure out what you want first, right? Like if you want a simple thing like Google Classroom, then Google Classroom will be productive. If you want something that has more submitted stuff, Schoology might, or Canvas might fit that, but they'll make it more complicated to get there. So we're still trying to, I think, find that middle LMS. But I think the same thing goes for productivity as well. Is I see too often people trying to solve productivity problems by going, well, if I just adopt this task tool, or I just adopt this productivity tool, or if I just start using this project management tool, all of a sudden our team will become much more productive. And that is like not the case at all, because those tools are designed for something specific. And if you don't know what you want before going in, or have some kind of idea of the system you want to apply, they end up falling short anyway. And that's what a lot of Will and I were trying to get to in our series we did, which was this idea of like productivity has to start with you figuring out what system works for you. Like take the technology out of it for a second and go, what's going to work for me productivity wise? Some people, it is just Post-it notes on a thing. They just need something in front of them to do things. That's not me, because I remember things at the weirdest times where Post-it notes are not with me. Like I don't just have Post-it notes in my back pocket and I'm like, sweet.
Josh may as well call his phone Notion. Like I am not joking. We'll be out for dinner. We'll be getting drinks. We had a movie, whatever it is. Like, hey, hit me up.
I was in the pool. We were in Mexico.
Yeah.
And somebody asked me if I could do. I think it was they needed somebody to help with a porch.
The porch.
Yeah. And I like swam over. Like
grabbed his phone, wrote down a note,
because clearly I'm such a good swimmer. I went over to the edge, grabbed my phone, and opened Notion and put a reminder in there for when I get back to deal with that, right? And like that's the system that works for me. The point of all of that being, like, my Notion stuff that's built started with me going, I need some kind of system that's going to work for me. Harness tech, high tech, that got built out of a system we needed. The base was, we're going to need some collaborative space that Will and I can both write down ideas, but also track progress of episodes and schedule episodes. And that birthed in our Notion thing what we call the episode board. And it allows us to, on a Kanban board, track every episode, where it's at through the process, but then switch a view and immediately see where it's scheduled in the recording calendar and immediately see where it's scheduled in our release calendar. And that has become an invaluable tool for us for planning. It's, I think, part of the key ways, like for us on the podcast, we're able to plan episodes. Like we've got most of the fall planned out of what we want to do, because we're able to leverage those tools there. But I could see for other people that not being as useful. That's not the thing they want to do, right? And so I think it all comes down to kind of the core system you want to use for what you're going to do. And I think that applies to LMSs and things too. It's too often schools adopt technology thinking it will solve their problem, and then they realize all it's done is make things more unproductive, because you just have another factor now in the midst of it.
Yes. And I think specifically on the topic of productivity, I love how you both start with the approach of like the philosophical approach, basically, like, and which I've never really thought of. I think a lot about that with tech integration into a classroom,
Yeah.
but I'm like, wait, why am I not thinking about it here? Like it applies just as much in terms of like, because you're right. Like Josh, you mentioned Evernote earlier.
Yeah.
I had a flashback because I almost had an identical experience with it like years ago. Or I think everybody did. It was like,
We've
"Ooh,
all been on that
Evernote."
train at some point.
I'm like,
Somebody went, a notes tool, Evernote. Ah!
It's like this big book you open and you're like, oh, whoa, I don't want to read that. Nope. Sorry. Yeah. So no, I really just I just love that approach and something that I might start thinking about more.
Well,
But
part of this too, hypothetically speaking, as a playing out of why we stand by this, right? Let's hypothetically say you have a long-standing team, some of which may have been there 15 and 17 years, and they're very entrenched in the ways they do things. And now you
Mm.
bring in a new guard, folks, hypothetically, who are really good at tech and really good at project management, and they show up with a platform, insert name, Asana, Rike, Trello, etc. And they go, this is how we're going to do it now. You're not going to overnight get those entrenched people over to a new system. What that takes is understanding where they are, understanding where you want to be, and helping bridge that gap. Bringing it.
Oh, you're bringing it back. This might be a book we need to actually write.
No, but like if you just and this has happened, like I've seen it happen in the context of an LMS. We did an LMS transition over the winterim break once. Yeah. We went from Moodle to Schoology, and we did not tell the faculty we were leaving Moodle until the middle or end of November, and then we transitioned, and a few exceptions were allowed to use Moodle into like April, but January 1st, undergrad came back and had to use Schoology. You know how many people we pissed off? You know how many people never came back to talk to our office? There are also some wins and successes, but like that was an example where you just the rip and tear does not make any friends and doesn't improve adoption. You know, you got to find that philosophical, you got to take measure of where people are, where you want them to be, and help in that middle. And that's Josh, that's me, that's Sophie, that's Steve. We're, I think, those kinds of people who are motivated and able to see the tech side of it and reach the people in the middle and help them bridge the gap. But without that, you lose a lot of opportunity. It can really hurt relationships. You can fail completely with a great project management system. We could take our Notion and put it on that, and it wouldn't work because the people aren't ready for it. So get your people ready.
Yeah. No, love all that. Love all that. We're almost out of time, folks. That's
how
I knew this conversation was just gonna fly because and I was telling Sophie, I'm like, you realize this episode could be ridiculous, but in a good way, right? Like in a completely good way, and it really has been. And so Will and Josh, we always wrap up this show with that one. It's like the one question show, right? Like the under the hat, the what is top of mind, and maybe 30-second answer. I don't know. Trying to keep it at an hour. And so, you know, what is top of mind right now, with the work that you're doing, maybe not just in education, but the productivity piece. And maybe start with Josh first, of just like, what is top of mind for you right now?
Yeah, what's top of mind for me right now, it's my place has been all over the place and transitioning. So like what's top of mind for me right now is just thinking carefully about how we honestly, the gap thing, like bring new people into a team or into a classroom and help them integrate and bring them across that gap. That's been a lot of my focus right now, is thinking from a learning and development side, like how do we create an experience that brings someone in and helps train them and bring them in those areas. So for 30 seconds, I can't give you all my answers for what I'm thinking. So, but you'll that's what's in Josh's brain right now. How do we do that and doing that well?
Yeah. I appreciate you keeping it under time. Yeah. Will, what about you? What's top of mind?
I'm going for 45 seconds. I promise you. No, I'm joking. I already spent 5 of my seconds.
You lost so much already. It's going bad.
I'm serious. Like that thing about compliance, I have to do this. It is a part of my job. But can we get people engaged with the philosophical reason? Anti-harassment discrimination. There's laws that mean we have to do it. But you know what it does mean? Being a good person, being excellent to one another, as Roy Kent or Brett Goldstein will say on anything he does. Brett ends everything he does with "be excellent to one another." So I want to help. I would love to make some way that the people can connect that content to that point of just being better people, being nice people.
Yeah, 100%. Love that, and I love that take in the work that you are doing, Will. Friends, we're over time, and so we could talk more. It's been fun. Yeah, it's been fun. We could talk more. Maybe we'll have to do this again sometime. Maybe we're on high tech. But by the way, for those that are watching or will catch it on YouTube later, hightechpod.us. Hopefully I got that right. But it's a really great show. And start with my episode first. And then move over to Sophie's. Yeah, definitely do that. Sophie's episode is actually very, very good. Escape rooming, very, very good topic. And
I don't know if I told Steve that, but I'm gonna be on again.
Yeah, Sophie's coming on soon.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. Be on watch out in a couple weeks. Sophie will be dropping on the High Tech Podcast.
Oh, I'm looking forward to that. Yeah. So thanks for telling me, Sophie, by the way. Just rude.
Rude. I think we just solidified it yesterday. So
no, that's good. Will, Josh, thank you both for being on. This has been a lot of fun, and it's always great talking with you.
Awesome. Sure. Thanks for having us, guys.
Yeah,
thanks.
All right, friends, for everyone that's watching, listening, doing whatever it is you're doing on this lovely Saturday, keep your hats on but your minds open. Until next time, you all enjoy this amazing Saturday. Welcome to the Under the Hat podcast,
the show where we talk about everything and anything that is top of mind in education.
The goal is to provide meaningful conversations to what is currently happening in our classrooms.
Stories, pain,